I am very pleased to introduce Anne Kostick. Anne is she's going to speak on ebook UX, bringing user experience design into the picture. Anne is a partner in FoxPath I&D, which is a web, print, and digital consulting and services firm focusing mainly on book publishing. Her column for Digital Book World, Digital Reading, discusses UX and related topics in ebooks and digital reading. Anne is a program director of the Digital Book Awards, the author of several books, in addition to being a member of the UXPA, which is the Usability Professionals Association, and an all-round UX fangirl. I turn it over to you, Anne.
Thank you very much. I just want to point out my low-tech notes compared to our high-tech committee members. Good morning. Usually, I just want to say that I hate going first. And I'm not a morning person particularly, but I was looking at the lineup of speakers and of topics that we have today, all dedicated to fine points of creating and making better, best, excellent digital books. And I realized that I'm really glad to be going first now, because what I have to say is I have a not-so-secret agenda. I really want to turn everybody in this room into book UX knowledge practitioners for whatever part of digital publishing you might find yourself involved in, whether you are the developer, the publisher, the publicist, any part of it you can contribute to improved user experience in the products and hopefully evolution of better digital books. User experience, or UX, I'm going to be saying both of those back and forth, is a pretty well-established discipline over 20 years. I'll look at a little bit of history, but what I'm really offering today is a pep talk, an overview, and a way of getting started to apply UX in your own practice. Here is a picture of a bookcase, because that's what people in our industry do. They throw up pictures of books. Makes us comfortable, reminds us of why we're doing what we're doing. It really means, though, let's see if I have a definition. Yes, I do. Making the user's experience of a product or a service better by first finding out what the user wants and doesn't want, and then improving the product through design, and then improving it again, and then again. So here's a list of terms. Let me just say that I often just write for myself UXK, UX knowledge. To me, that means the collected understanding of how users use products that has been developed through research and design over the last many decades. We can apply that knowledge ourselves. There are a lot of terms that apply to UX. You will see these. They all mean pretty much the same thing, or maybe a slice of the whole. User experience design, user research, usability, human-computer interaction is very popular. And one industry, however, that never really bothered with UX is, of course, the book publishing industry. And why should they? Because after all, they are making a product that their customers know how to use. And it was established hundreds of years ago, and it's fine, and there's no problem with it. The basic specs haven't changed in a couple of hundred years, and so just going to leave it alone until recently. And recently is where we get into this problem. So here's my lightning-fast history. UX development really actually started in the late 19th century with the industrialization of manufacturing, and continued on through into the 20th century when people began to analyze how humans and machines interacted. Most of the time, that analysis was for the benefit of the industrialists, not for the benefit of the workers. This is a picture of the Ford assembly plant that may have made better cars. I don't know if it made better workers. But towards the middle of the 20th century, human factors came into play. Machines got so complicated that they became dangerous. A man named Paul Fitts, for example, did a lot of investigating of, during the Second World War with the Air Force, why pilots couldn't seem to, I guess, hit the eject button. This is at least my understanding of it, because the cockpits had too many controls. There was too much complexity. And he did some amazing work there. A designer, an industrial designer by the name of Henry Dreyfus, designed many of the objects of our daily life that are really iconic at this point. And he wrote, this is the telephone, one of the telephones he designed. He wrote a book called Designing for People, which essentially said, people come first. It's surprising now to think that that had to be said or stated, but it did, and it was, and now we accept this as being true. For a long time, it wasn't necessarily true. As we move towards the 70s and computers and screen reading and all things digital came into play, we're now talking about people who are still alive, which is nice. Donald Norman is one of my favorites. I just actually met him last month. That was very exciting for me. And he wrote a very important book called The Design of Everyday Things. It was actually published first in 1988. And he talked about, for example, too many buttons on remote control devices, too many functions in multi-function touch-tone telephones, the push bar on the doors of commercial buildings, all the design, let's say, failures that happen in our life, and then we blame ourselves because we can't work the remote control. Well, it's not us, it's them. And redesign was necessary. Don Norman was actually the person who coined the term user experience. He was working at Apple in the early 90s. And this cover is something I just love because it says everything you want to hear about failed user design right there. I would not want to use that teapot. Here's another interesting thing about UXers. They come from so many different disciplines. This is one of the things that makes me really happy. They bring everything that they know and have learned to their practice of UX design and research. And that's why you can too. But a tremendous amount of UX is derived from the social sciences, from psychology and anthropology, and studies of human behaviors and emotions, and all that we put into objects. And I can't think of an object that we put more emotion into than books. You ask anybody what they like about books, half of them will say they like the way they smell. The other half will say they like the way they feel, or they like to, flip the pages with their index finger. There are all these behaviors that have to do with emotion. In publishing, you do find practice of UX these days in the areas of, for example, book discovery online. Anything that's screen and interactive based has got to have a certain amount of user experience knowledge applied to make it workable at all. Where we don't see it enough is in the actual reading of the actual book. So speaking of the actual book, let's have a lightning history of the book for a minute. This is really the Codex we're talking about, not scrolls and certain other things. The Codex was established and popularized a really long time ago, like more than 1,500 years ago. The word Codex really just means, I think it means wooden boards, so the covers. But it was that long ago that people folded and gathered pages or papyrus or vellum or tree pulp and bound it in one way or another and put it between boards. Development proceeded, movable type, as we all know, Germany, 1455, actually earlier in Korea, illustrations quickly thereafter. And during this whole period, people were using the Codex and applying innovations. What were the innovations for? They were for finding the information inside of the Codex. Here's a list of innovations and some of the dates of their establishment. These are the ones I could find, at any rate. Some of these dates are a long time ago. And we accept these things as coming with books, tables of contents, spaces between words instead of periods, margins, bookmarks, indexes, and so forth. But they weren't always there. Somebody had to think it up, put it in, prototype it, iterate it. You'll hear these words later. Finally, adapt it and adopt it until it seemed to be there forever. So really, the book as the object has been perfected maybe 200 years. These are two books that I have. One of them was published in 1870. The other, I bought it last year. They're the same. They're essentially the same. I know how to use them. And then we get into trouble. We have a digital book. We have actually 20 years of screen reading experience. But we've removed so many of the ways we know how to find information in this book that we are at sea. People who do a lot of information retrieval or screen reading on computers can manipulate these things, but something else is lost. And this is what gradually we want to improve. Speaking of visual orientation, I have to find out where I am. All right. So I just have a little digression to make. This is an important point to me, so bear with me. This is my digression screen. I once led a conference where I argued that we really had to come up with another name for book, and here's why. We use that word to refer to a zillion different things, and we're not always talking about the same thing, and we're not always being clear about what we mean. But here is the problem. We use it to refer to the content of the book, the format of the book, the intellectual property, the ideas, the meaning behind the text, the experience of reading. We use it to refer to the entire industry we're in when we know that publishing a textbook and creating a work of fiction or a picture book for children is a very different design process, production process, sales, straight down the line. All right, so really we've got thing one, which I'm going to try for the rest of this presentation, but I'll probably mess up because habit is powerful. That's the Codex. I'm going to call it the Codex. We have thing two, which is the intellectual property. That's where we need a new word, but let's call it the file. We all know what we mean, right? That's the file. And then there's the thing three that we really want to improve through UX, hopefully, or in any way, maybe through lightning inspiration. And that's the experience of reading. That's that ineffable thing that happens in your brain while you are reading the book. Okay, so back on track. Thank you for your patience. The difference between book design and UX design. There is a difference. Book design is a craft and a discipline and an art that takes established graphic elements and creates something that we know, the page, the volume, the rectangle. The use is understood. UX design uses graphic elements along with many other elements to create the reading experience. There is an established UX cycle. This is Don Norman's list, and it's very top level. It can get much more detailed. And you can start basically anywhere in this cycle. And what do the words mean, essentially? Your research is observation of one sort or another. Your research might be gathering information. Ideate, that's a fancy word for thinking things up. Prototype, that's a fancy word for making stuff. Testing, that's a fancy word for watching people fail to use your product or succeed in using your product. Iterating is producing it, and then again, and around we go. UXers have a very deep toolkit for each of these sections. They use surveys and questionnaires. They use comparative assessments. That's basically looking at other people's products. Bug lists and wish lists we'll talk about a little later. When they are ideating, they use mental models, which is essentially trying to figure out what your user is thinking. Drawing and sketching is very big. In fact, all UXers are encouraged to get out their pencils and prove that they really can't draw. And I'll be showing you some fine examples of my own inability to draw a little bit later. And they also have brainstorming sessions where they throw out the craziest ideas they can think of and then pare them down. And if all of this sounds really easy, like something you could do, you're right. It is something you can do. And it's something that you can apply to your work at all times. Prototyping is a lot of fun because especially since we're not making jet airplanes, paper turns out to be a great way to prototype something. Isn't that ironic? I think so. Now, I have pulled out a few of these things that I feel are special for using in ebooks. Things that you should remember if you decide to move forward and apply some of these tools and techniques to your own work. When you are researching and testing, one of the things you must remember is not you. That's a keyword, not me. You are your own worst test subject. Do not ask yourself what you like or don't like in digital book reading. Don't ask yourself where the back button is or where the index is, because you know, and you can't not know. So when you gather your test subjects, when you gather your survey respondents, not you, and not your work colleagues either. They know as much as you do. Leave them out. Find someone else, anybody, somebody at Starbucks, the crossing guard at in front of the school, doesn't matter. When you're designing, think hard about what your customer wants, what your customer's strengths are. One very interesting item that came up for book readers is, what do all book readers have in common? What do they do really well? They read words. They have what's known as a verbal skew. They understand a word. How about a word like next or page or click, go here? Maybe they understand those words better than an icon or a graphic element. Why not use the word? This is what we do best. This is what they understand best. So think about your user's verbal skew when you're designing. Use your product strength is a good one. Now, each book is unique. So let's say you're designing a textbook. There are elements of a textbook that should be brought forward and made most important because that's your product strength. Whether it's a quiz or something else, bring it forward and make sure that your reader knows where it is. When you're prototyping or iterating, as I've said, paper is perfect. You can do these things on paper and gain a lot of information, and I will show you some of that. But another thing is, these are all phrased so that we can remember them more easily. Files are flexible. If you want to try out a new arrangement or reorganization of material, you can put it in a small file. You can wrap it up and you can sideload it and you can hand the device to the person at Starbucks or the crossing guard and see how it works and observe. We have the ability to do that. Fortunately, it's not expensive and it works. Here's another really important rule of UX that you're going to want to remember, and that is the rule of 5. This is a very established principle of user experience research, one that just amazed me. You only need 5 research subjects in a study to get 85% of the information you need for a design. We're not, a pharmaceutical company. We don't have to run a test with 10,000 subjects. You need 5 people. We can go to the park and get 5 people, and we will know what we need to know. I find that very liberating. That means I can really go out and test my ideas, whatever they are. Here's another important word, goggles. Goggles stands for the perspective that we all carry around with us whenever we look at a product. Goggles is, I guess, the downside of our deep knowledge of our subject. And when doing UX research and development, you want to take off the goggles of familiarity, to quote Leah Bewley, who is a UX researcher. You want to put them aside, try to put on the goggles of the researcher or even of your subject, your test subject. See the product new, see the product from a different point of view. So if we were all working on a survey and I just yelled goggles, everybody would immediately take off their goggles and look at everything from a different perspective, right? So let's talk a little bit more about user research. In the case of ebooks, user research can be ask questions. You can take a survey. You can write a survey with very specific questions, or you can just go to the corner and say, so, what do you think, ebooks, paper books? And people will tell you what they think. In fact, you don't even have to ask. They'll tell you, and they'll tell you. In fact, when I met Don Norman last month, boy, did he tell me all about what was wrong with publishing and books, and went on and on. What you'll find, if you really listen, is tremendous overlaps. You will discover what it is about digital books that just aren't working for a lot of people, or are working. And then we can start trying to design to those particular strengths and weaknesses. We can try to overcome the weaknesses. Observation is another form of research. This is a picture from an observation exercise that we did last month. But what it really amounts to is you do formulate your task very specifically, set up a task and a goal. The goal is, for example, to find something in a book. Go to page 12, go to page 11, chapter 10, and compare findability. Don't forget, though, when you're done taking notes after your observation, ask your subject for feedback. Ask your subject to say, how did you do that? What were you thinking while you did it? Get as much information from them about the process as possible. 5 people, observe 5 people, and you will know everything you need to know about findability in your ebook. There's nothing more boring than watching somebody read, I admit. You'll see that you can do this anywhere. You don't need a fancy lab. We were sitting in a conference room much like this, and the observers aren't, actually, now that I look, they're not even observing, they're taking notes. But you get the point. There are other ways to gather information also. A comparative assessment is pretty much what it sounds like. What do you like about other products? Make a chart. How does this compare to the product you're working on? Ask other people to do a comparative assessment too. And again, the overlap of what you find will guide you. A bug list is, that's the written down equivalent of the street corner complainer, I guess. The bug list is ask somebody to write down everything they dislike about a product. What bugs them? What annoys them? Mark it down. A wish list is the opposite. These sound very simple, but they are extremely useful tools. Here's a picture of one of our observers from the exercise who had arranged her notes on the back of the chair next to her. Again, a do-it-yourself experimental lab. She used her Post-it notes, color-coded them, put an observation on each one, and arranged them, and there they were for display, and I really thought that was nice. So we can move on to ideating now, which, as I said, really just means thinking stuff up. And I said that paper was a perfectly good way to do so many things. Here is a printout of a screen of a digital book. In this case, it's Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, one of my favorites, where various people all weighed in with what they wanted to see in the screen, what they thought might be possible on the screen, with the paper substituting for screen and plenty of margin for writing. Will all these ideas be implemented? Are they able to be implemented? Maybe, maybe not, but we're ideating. We are coming up with ideas. Some of these were sparked by people saying that they wanted to be able to get to the index faster. They kept losing their place on the screen. They wanted to know where they were. They wanted a placeholder. And we're responding to these various ideas. Another thing you can do is some of the things I'm going to talk about now kind of straddle some of these stages. But let's say you want to test something. As I said, you can wrap up a file, put it on a screen, and test. And in the picture on the right, the thing I found fascinating, it didn't come out in the photograph, but how she was using her hand to navigate this page. Whenever you see somebody posing with a digital reader, they usually have one finger out But what this lady is doing is she's like grabbing the whole page. she is almost ready to use all her fingers. And that really got me thinking about how we do and do not use touchscreens in our design. On the left is another approach to prototyping. Here's a screen page printed out on a transparency sheet of clear plastic. Behind it are colored strips and markers and so forth to allow a tester to move things around to say, where do you want this best? Where does your hand go? Can you have an inline link that is a word? Can it say index right below the line if you want to see, or footnote, if you want to, how do you get to the footnote? So it's just a demonstration of how you can use paper to get more information for your product design. Another exercise we did had to do with the parts of a book. There are long lists of the parts of a book. You can get it from the Chicago Manual, from the front of the Chicago Manual of Style. Everything that might ever be in front matter or back matter or in between. If you ask a reader to arrange some of those parts of the book, either to select the ones that matter and put them somewhere where she or he can get at them quickly and repeatedly, that's information for you. If you try to think about how you might display the parts of the book for quick access, it's true, not every book is going to have all these parts. And so you'll experiment, you'll try, but paper can help you. Paper can really lead to some wonderful new things. You can get ideas from anywhere. I was putting this presentation together a while ago, and I discovered a new thing that you can do in PowerPoint that got me thinking. Here's a slide I made. I took some elements, I put them together. You click a button. I never knew this before. You click a button and this happens. Did everybody know this except me? You get each part of your slide on a slice, and then you can rearrange the slices. You can click and drag them and put them in a different order. I was amazed. And I started to think, why can't I navigate an ebook that way? Why can't I have dimensional navigation? This is where my drawing skills are displayed, but I have no shame. Dimensional navigation. Couldn't I turn it on edge, see everything that there is in that page that's related to that page with a through line and, touch where I want and bring them forward? I would love that. Please make it for me. Here's another example. Here's a picture of my library, the Brooklyn Public Library Central Branch. On the left, it was new 75 years ago. On the right, today, looks pretty much the same from the front. And I was reading, because it's the 75th anniversary, that the designer had in mind an open book on end, which you totally can't see when you're, climbing the monumental stairs to the monumental doorway. But from the satellite view, or the bird's eye view in 1939, you can see it very clearly. And I thought, why can't I have this as a place marker, as a way to show me how far I've come in the book, where I am in the book? That's what I do. If I'm reading a print book and I go like that to see how far along I am, that's an immediate clue, not location number 2932. So that's what I want, dimensional locating. Here's another one of my great drawings. It looks just like the Brooklyn Public Library if I were a pigeon. What I'm trying to say is there are many ways at coming at improvement of the digital reading experience. Some of the ones I've just shown you are actually a little bit regressive because they depend on the printed book, the metaphor, really, of the Codex. But that's familiar and comfortable and emotional. And that is something that readers depend on, like that picture of books makes us happy. At some point, we will all let go of that. We will be dwelling in the third or even the fourth dimension, and that'll be fine, but you can't get too far ahead of your readers too quickly. We do know some things about what readers want and all of their complaints translate into. And our challenge is how to get there. So yes, they want flow. They want to just not notice the whatever it is they're using to read. And unfortunately, still, digital screen readers, are way too burdensome. They have to think about what they're doing too much. They want serendipity. They don't want to find things. They want to stumble on wonderful things in a book. That's harder to do in screen reading than elsewhere. They want transparency, that they want to be able to see the whole in some mental way at all times. They want simplicity. I don't have to explain what that is. And they want orientation in space. They want to feel that there's something there. They need to be anchored in some way. Can we give this to them? Well, I think we can. We don't have to wait for the great technological leaps that will get us farther along. We can do it incrementally and iteratively, meaning we can make a lot of digital books and each one can be a little better than the one before. We don't have to wait, because if we're all in this industry together, it's because we care about this product. We care about betterment. We care about making a better product step by step. So let me say that this is an introduction to UX for all of you. There is a ton more to be said about it. I could go on and on. I might go on and on. If you want more, if you want some recommended reading and a lot of online resources, I have a PDF I can send you. Just send me an email. Happy to do that. And to remind you to use your UX knowledge for betterment, join the digital book evolution, and make better books. And thank you very much.